I wasn't looking for love when I rented her guest room. I wasn't even looking for comfort. What I needed was space. Space to breathe, to figure out who I was now that my marriage was over. After 7 years of sleeping beside someone who barely spoke to me, of dinner in silence and weekend plans that felt like obligations, I just wanted silence that didn't hurt. I wanted stillness without shame. My name is Lucas, and when I packed up my life and left our overpriced condo in downtown Toronto, I thought I was escaping everything that had gone wrong. I didn't know I was heading straight into something I couldn't explain or resist. Her name was Ray. She ran a cozy Airbnb just outside Kingston, charming little house tucked into a quiet cul-de-sac, with a garden that smelled like rosemary and old rain. The listing said cozy guest room, private bath, ideal for remote workers. But it didn't mention the way the porch light made everything look warmer than it should, or how the front door seemed like it had been opened 1,000 times in hope, not habit. I pulled up around sunset, the sky bleeding gold across the driveway, and when she answered the door, barefoot in jeans and a faded flannel shirt, I forgot how to speak for a second. She wasn't glamorous, she didn't wear makeup or try to impress, but something about her made the air feel charged. Her eyes were sharp, a kind of blue-gray that didn't ask questions so much as read answers off your skin. She gave me a slow smile, one that didn't reach all the way, like she'd learned not to give too much away. "You're Lucas," she said. It wasn't a question. "And you're Ray," I replied, trying not to sound too thrown. She showed me around quickly kitchen. Its coffee machine, towels in the hall closet, a guest room with a wide window that looked out over her backyard. I noticed she had a record player in the corner of the living room and stacks of vinyl by the fireplace, Fleetwood Mac, The National, and some old jazz. She moved like someone who was used to being alone, but hadn't decided if she liked it yet. The first night I couldn't sleep. My body was exhausted, but my mind was still running. Regret, guilt, anger, everything I hadn't said to my ex was now screaming inside me. I padded down to the kitchen around 1 a.m. to find something to help tea, maybe, or even just a distraction. I didn't expect to find Ray there, sitting at the counter in a loose sweater, legs curled beneath her, a glass of red wine in one hand and a paperback in the other. She looked up, unfazed. "Couldn't sleep." I shook my head. "Too much noise in here?" I said, tapping my temple. She smiled faintly and pushed the bottle toward me. "Help yourself." I poured a glass and sat across from her, unsure of the rules. She didn't speak for a while, and neither did I. There was something comforting about the quiet with her. Didn't demand anything. She finally closed her book and looked at me like she was weighing something. "What are you running from?" she asked softly. I should have lied. Should have said I just needed a change of scenery or some vague excuse about work. But her voice disarmed me. I didn't feel judged, only seen. "My wife stopped loving me," I said, surprising even myself. "A long time ago, I think. I just didn't want to believe it." She nodded like she understood more than she let on. "Mine left 2 years ago. Not for someone else, just left. Said he couldn't breathe around me anymore." Felt like she'd handed me a raw piece of herself. Not dramatic, just real. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "Me too," she replied. "But sometimes being alone is quieter." We talked until almost 3 a.m. about everything and nothing. Childhood stories, old records, what it means to start over at 30-something. Her laugh was soft and low, the kind that made you lean in without meaning to. And there was a moment brief, almost nothing, where our hands brushed, and neither of us pulled away. My skin buzzed. Hers did too. I saw it in her eyes. But we didn't act on it. Not then. She stood slowly, yawned, and said, "Get some sleep, Lucas." And as she walked past me, her fingers grazed mine one more time, just enough pressure to say, "I see you." Without saying anything at all, I stood alone in the kitchen for a few minutes after she left. The silence wasn't painful anymore. It was full of possibility, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had started. Something I wasn't ready for. Something I didn't want to stop. Asterisk when I woke up the next morning. Sunlight streamed through the wide guest room window like it had something to say. The bed was warm, the room still, and for a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then I saw the note on the nightstand. Coffee's on, help yourself. Ray, just those 6 words. But I reread them twice, like they meant more than they should. Maybe they did. Or maybe I was just desperate to believe someone could care about me without needing a reason. I found her in the kitchen, humming along to a mellow song on the radio. She wore a loose t-shirt tucked halfway into her jeans, hair piled messily on her head. No makeup, no pretense. When she saw me, she smiled slow, honest, like morning hadn't quite touched her yet. "Morning," she said, sliding a mug toward me. "Did you sleep eventually?" "Eventually," I replied, watching the way her fingers curled around her own cup. "Thanks for last night," she shrugged. I couldn't sleep either. Company helped. It felt casual on the surface, but something had shifted. I could feel it in the air between us. She didn't avoid my eyes, but she didn't quite hold them either. There was a tremble under the calm, like we both knew we'd crossed an invisible line, even if we hadn't touched lips or shed clothes. I told myself to be smart. This wasn't my house, wasn't my life. Ray was a stranger, technically. I was just a man who rented a room and got a little too comfortable, but still, I lingered in the kitchen with her. Washed dishes I didn't dirty. Asked about the books on her shelf. She told me she used to be a librarian before the budget cuts, and now she did freelance editing from home. Said she liked quiet work and people who didn't expect too much from her. I wanted to tell her that I liked people like her, that the quiet between us didn't feel empty, it felt charged. But I did in single quotes. Instead, I worked in the guest room most of the day, doing the remote IT contract that let me keep running from place to place. I told myself I'd treat this like any other rental. Polite boundaries, respect the space, stay invisible. But every time I heard her laugh through the wall or walk down the hall, I found myself pausing, listening, wanting. That night, she knocked on my door around 9. "I made tea," she said. "Figured you might want a break." I did. God, I did. We sat on the porch this time, wrapped in old blankets. Her dog, an aging mutt named Harley, curled between us like a chaperone who had long since stopped caring. The night was quiet, cool. The stars sharp against the country black sky. She asked me what I wanted now that I was free, and I realized I didn't know. "I think I want to feel something again." I said, "Something real, not just survive it all." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." I looked at her, then really looked. The way her face tilted toward the stars, the curve of her bare shoulder where the blanket slipped down. Her skin was lit by moonlight, and in that moment she looked so heartbreakingly alive, it made my chest ache. "Do you ever think about starting over?" I asked. She glanced at me. "Every day." We sat like that for a while, the silence full of words neither of us could say yet. And then, right as I was about to stand and say goodnight, she surprised me. "Lucas," she said, soft and low. I turned to her. "I don't usually let people in here," she continued. "In my space, in my life." "I know," I said. "I'm not trying to take anything." "I know you're not," she replied. "And that might be why I want to give you something." My heart pounded as she reached for me tentatively at first, like she wasn't sure if I'd let her. Her hand found mine, warm and firm, and held on. It wasn't sexual, not yet. It was something deeper, a connection that didn't need to be explained or earned. It just was. She stood, the blanket falling from her shoulders, and looked at me like the answer was already written in my eyes. "Good night," she whispered, and turned away. I watched her walk back inside, barefoot and fearless in the dark, and I swear I felt something click into place. This wasn't just a stop on my way to somewhere else. Ray wasn't just a woman I met by chance. She was beginning to feel like the place I hadn't known I was looking for. The night it finally happened wasn't planned. It wasn't candlelit or dramatic. It was quiet, natural, like gravity pulled us there. And all we had to do was stop resisting. It started with music Fleetwood Mac on the record player, her favorite. I'd had a long day of back-to-back video calls and dull code. And when I wandered into the living room after dinner, she was already there, barefoot, sipping wine. Swaying slightly to the music, she looked at me over her shoulder and smiled. "Long day?" she asked, moving aside so I could sit beside her on the couch. I nodded, leaning back. "You have no idea." She handed me the glass she hadn't touched. I took it, our fingers brushing. That same electric feeling passed between us again, but neither of us flinched this time. We sat in silence for a while, just listening. The kind of silence that felt full, not empty. Then she said, almost too softly to hear, "Do you want to stay in here tonight?" I looked at her, heart suddenly racing. "Do you mean?" I started, unsure if I was misunderstanding. She nodded. "I want to be close to someone. I want you." "But only if you want that too." God, I did. I didn't answer with words. I leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Our lips met gently at first, tentative. But the second time when our mouths really found each other, it deepened fast, like we'd been holding back for too long. Her fingers tangled in my shirt, pulling me closer. Her body fitting against mine like she'd always been meant to be there. We made it to her room in a day's hands, exploring. Breath-catching, clothes-shedding one by one, between kisses and laughter and small gasps that felt like confessions. She tasted like red wine and something sweeter, and every inch of her skin felt like fire beneath my hands. She wasn't performative. She didn't fake sounds or pose. She was raw, present, and fully in it, with me moaning softly, breathing hard, whispering my name like it had weight. We didn't rush. We took our time, made love like it mattered, and it did. God, it did. Not because of lust, but because something else had taken root. Something fragile and beautiful and alive between us after. We lay there, tangled in each other, her head on my chest. Our legs wrapped together under the covers like they never wanted to separate again. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she whispered, "I don't usually do this." "I don't either," I said truthfully. "Not like this." She nodded against my chest, and I felt the tiniest shake in her breath. Like she was afraid. "Are we making a mistake?" she asked. I kissed her forehead. "I don't know. It doesn't feel like one." She reached for my hand and held it like she was anchoring herself. Like maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to drift anymore. Neither did I, that night. I didn't sleep in the guest room, and I didn't want to ever. Again, the morning after felt surreal, not awkward, not regretful, but delicate. Like we'd stepped into something tender and real, and now we were both scared to touch it too hard in case it shattered. Ray was still asleep when I woke. Her body curled into mine, skin warm, hair soft across my chest. The rise and fall of her breath was steady, calm. It's peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years, not even during the best moments of my marriage. I lay there quietly, watching the way her lips parted just slightly when she exhaled. The way her fingers unconsciously gripped my wrist like she didn't want me to leave. And the truth was, I didn't want to leave either. We stayed in bed most of the day, talking, laughing, touching. There was more sex, slow and playful and open, but also long. Quiet moments where we just stared at the ceiling and admitted things we'd never said out loud. She told me she used to be terrified of being alone, but now she was terrified of needing someone again. I told her I'd been the kind of husband who stayed too long in a dead marriage just to prove I wasn't a failure. "It wasn't your fault," she said, tracing circles on my chest. "You just forgot you mattered too." That nearly undid me. We spent the next few days in that strange in-between space, closer than friends, but not calling it anything yet. We cooked dinner together, took long walks with Harley down country roads, watched old movies on her couch, tangled up under blankets like teenagers. I kept telling myself I'd leave soon, that this was temporary. Just a pause in the middle of my messed up life. But with every hour, She felt more like something permanent. And then came the knock on the door. I was in the backyard trimming dead branches off one of her fruit trees when I heard voices from the front porch. At first, I didn't think much of it until I heard his voice. Deep, confident, male. I stepped around the house and saw him standing there, arms crossed, a duffel bag at his feet. Tall, well-dressed, with that smug I belong here energy that made my stomach twist instantly. Ray's ex-husband. I didn't need to be told. I felt it. I just needed to see you. He was saying, to talk. Maybe fix things. She stood frozen, arms crossed tight over her chest. Hey, you don't get to show up like this, Owen. Not after 2 years of nothing. I made a mistake, he said. But I'm here now. That has to count for something. It took everything in me not to interrupt. To let her handle it. But my fists clenched anyway. I could see her unraveling, confused, caught between fury and memory. He reached for her hand. She pulled back. I'm not yours anymore. That should have been it. But then he looked past her right at me, and something in his smirk said, You think this is real? She's not done with me. Ray turned, saw me standing there, and her expression cracked. For the first time since we'd met, I couldn't read her. Later that night, she was quiet, distant, sitting on the edge of her bed like she didn't know where she belonged anymore. He's not staying, she said, but I could hear the tremble. Behind it, the maybe. And just like that, everything between us, everything we built, suddenly felt like it was standing on a cliff's edge, ready to fall. I didn't sleep that night. Ray lay next to me, but it wasn't the same. Her back was turned, her body tense, like she was trying not to exist too loudly. I watched the ceiling in the dark, my heart pounding with thoughts I didn't want to have, greedy, needy thoughts. Thoughts full of questions I was afraid to ask. Was he still in her head? Had he ever left it? By morning, I felt like a guest in her bed again. Not her lover, not her comfort. Just someone she let in for a while, until something more familiar knocked on her door. She made coffee like she always did, but she didn't hum. Didn't meet my eyes. I need some space today, she said quietly. Just time to think. I nodded, but it cut deeper than I let on, so I left. I drove aimlessly. Down the highway, past gas stations and farmhouses and endless stretches of trees. I pulled over at a diner, ordered food I didn't touch, stared at my phone like it might tell me what to do. I didn't message her. I didn't want to seem desperate. But truthfully, I was. When I finally came back that evening, the house was quiet, dim, her car was there. But the lights were off and Owen's duffel bag was gone. Relief rushed through me, hot and dizzying. But it didn't last. Ray was in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a glass of whiskey and a look I'd never seen on her before, uncertain, shamed. He asked me to come back to him, she said, eyes fixed on the glass. Said he misses the version of me that used to make him feel whole. I stood still, heart thudding. And what did you say? She looked up slowly. I told him I'm not that version anymore. I told him I'd met someone who reminded me what being seen feels like. I should have felt victorious, wanted, but her voice cracked when she said it. And her eyes, God, her eyes looked tired. I slept with him once, she said, almost a whisper. 2 weeks before you arrived. He showed up out of nowhere and I was lonely, weak, and then he left again, just like he always does. I sat down slowly, the weight of her honesty hitting like a punch. You didn't owe me anything before I got here. I said carefully, but Ray, are you done with him? Really? She blinked, a single tear sliding down her cheek. I want to. I want you. But part of me still hates how easily he can make me feel like a 25-year-old girl who begged to be loved. That was the moment. It's the turning point. Because I loved her more for admitting that than I ever could have if she'd lied. She wasn't perfect. She was real. Messy, human, complicated. And so was I. I reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away this time. We don't have to have all the answers right now, I said. but I'm still here and I'm not him. She squeezed my hand, tears falling freely now. I know, and that's what scares me. That night, we didn't have sex. We didn't even kiss. We just held each other under the covers while the silence between us healed slowly, quietly, and in that silence, I felt something stronger than lust. I felt her choose me, not perfectly, not forever, but for now. And that was enough. Asterisk, it's been 6 weeks since Ray told me the truth about him, about her, about the parts of herself she wasn't proud of. I think I loved her more in that moment than in any of the nights we spent. Tangled in sheets, she didn't beg me to stay. I didn't ask her to promise anything, but we both stayed. The mornings got easier. So did the nights. Slowly, the tension faded, like a fever breaking. She laughed more. I started unpacking the suitcase I never intended to keep shut this long. Little things changed: her toothbrush beside mine, my flannel hanging on the hook. By her back door, the guest room became a storage space for forgotten boxes. I never stepped foot in it again. She kissed me while we were making pancakes one morning out of nowhere. Just smiled and pressed her mouth to mine like it was the most natural thing in the world, and it was. That kiss didn't feel like a question anymore. It felt like home. But just when I thought things had settled, the universe reminded me how fragile peace can be. One night, I came back from a hardware store run to find Ray sitting on the porch with a manila envelope in her lap. She looked up at me like she'd just read something that rearranged her entire world. "It's from Owen," she said. Her voice was flat. To calm, I sat down beside her, heart climbing into my throat. Inside the envelope was a letter, handwritten, full of apologies, promises, memories. But what mattered most was what came with it: divorce papers. Signed, final. She stared at them for a long time. He finally let go. And just like that, the ghost between us was gone. She didn't cry, she didn't smile either. Just folded the letter up and looked at me like she was waiting for my reaction. So I gave her one. I stood up, took her hands, and said the first truth I'd been too scared to speak out loud. I don't want to leave. Not your house, not your bed, not you. Her breath caught. You were never just a guest here, Lucas. She pulled me in, held me so tight it felt like the pieces of both our broken pasts fused into something whole. That night, we didn't have sex because we needed to forget or feel wanted or shut out the world. We made love because we knew. Because even with all the cracks, this thing between us was real, and maybe it wouldn't be perfect. Maybe we'd fight. Maybe we'd doubt. Maybe the past would still knock on our door sometimes, but we'd answer it together. Now, months later, I think back to the first night I arrived. I thought I was just renting a guest room. I thought I was hiding out, starting over, trying to feel something again. But I didn't just find space. I found her, and somehow she found me, too, not in the room I rented, but in the one she opened. Up when she let me into her heart, the one I never want to leave.